I knew I was in trouble the moment I saw Kathleen Walsh marching across my front lawn in her designer pantsuit, clutching a bright pink folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. After 20 years as a combat engineer in the Army, I can smell danger from a mile away, and this was about to get explosive. "Mr. Evans," she said, her voice crisp as starched linen, "I'm here about your garden situation." I wiped my dirt-covered hands on my jeans and stood up from where I'd been planting tomatoes. "Good morning, Kathleen. What can I help you with?" I'd only moved into Pinewood Estates 3 months ago, retiring after my final tour. The small ranch-style home with its sprawling quarter-acre lot was perfect for my plans, a large garden where I could grow food and find some peace. Kathleen Walsh, president of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association for 15 consecutive years, as she reminded everyone at every opportunity, narrowed her eyes at the raised garden beds I'd built. "This," she said, gesturing at my garden with manicured nails, "is a violation of HOA Covenant Section 11.3, which prohibits vegetable gardens in front yards. I'm issuing you a formal notice and fine of $250, with an additional $50 per day until this is removed." She thrust a pink paper at me, which I took but didn't look at. I was too busy controlling my breathing. My therapist had taught me techniques for managing my PTSD, and right now, I needed them. "Kathleen, I read the HOA regulations thoroughly before buying this house. There's nothing about garden placement in the sections that were provided to me." Her smile was thin, practiced. "Section 11.3 was updated at our last quarterly meeting. All homeowners were notified." She pointed to a neatly typed sentence at the bottom of the violation notice. "You have 7 days to comply or face additional penalties." As she strutted back to her Mercedes SUV, I stood amid my half-planted tomatoes feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. I'd purchased this home specifically for the gardening potential. The VA therapist had suggested horticulture therapy for my PTSD, and it was working. The garden wasn't just a hobby, it was my lifeline. Little did Kathleen know, she had just declared war on the wrong soldier. That evening, I spread out all my home-buying paperwork on the kitchen table. My neighbor, Gina Ellis, a retired history professor who'd brought me a welcome basket when I moved in, sat across from me sipping tea. "I've lived here 12 years, she said, flipping through my HOA covenant copy. "And I can tell you, Kathleen changes these rules whenever it suits her agenda. Last year, she forced the Thompsons to repaint their house because the shade of gray was too blue. But they can't just make up rules after people buy in, can they?" I asked. Gina shrugged. "They do it all the time. Most people don't have the energy to fight." I found the section Kathleen had referenced. It was there in my copy, but not as she described it. The original text prohibited structures and installations that obstruct neighborly views. Nothing about garden placement. "Look at this," I said, showing Gina my phone where I'd pulled up the HOA website. "The updated covenant is dated last week, but Kathleen claimed it changed last quarter." "Classic Kathleen," Gina muttered. As we combed through more documents, I discovered something interesting in the property records I'd received during closing, something my real estate agent had mentioned but I hadn't paid much attention to at the time. "Water rights?" Gina asked, leaning forward to see the document I was studying. "Apparently, when the subdivision was built in the 1970s, it was part of an old farm. The original farmer retained the water rights when selling the land. Those rights transferred with this specific property." I looked up at Gina. "According to this, I own the access rights to the aquifer that supplies water to the entire neighborhood." Gina's eyes widened. "Oh my. You know the HOA contracts with Westlake Water Company to pump and distribute that water, right? They charge us a fortune on our HOA dues for it." I felt the corners of my mouth turning up. "I think I need to learn more about water rights in this state." "Jake," Gina said, her voice suddenly serious. "Be careful. Kathleen doesn't fight fair. Last year, when Marco Rodriguez questioned the HOA budget, she somehow got the zoning board to investigate his home office. The man nearly lost his accountancy license." I nodded, but the soldier in me was already formulating a battle plan. Thanks for the warning, but I've faced worse enemies than Kathleen Walsh. What I didn't know then was just how dirty this fight would get, or the secrets that lurked beneath Pinewood Estate's perfectly manicured surface. The next morning, I was drinking coffee on my front porch when a county water utility truck pulled up. A man in overalls approached, clipboard in hand. "Jake Evans? I'm Doug from County Water Resources. Got a call about an unauthorized well installation." I frowned. "There's no well here. I just moved in a few months ago." Doug consulted his clipboard. "Complaint says you're drilling an illegal well to avoid HOA water restrictions. Filed by K. Walsh." I nearly spilled my coffee. "She's lying. Feel free to inspect the property." After Doug confirmed there was no well and left, I called the county offices to report the false complaint. While on hold, I noticed a silver Mercedes crawling past my house. Kathleen was conducting a personal surveillance mission. Two can play at that game, I thought. I spent the afternoon at the county records office, then visited a water rights attorney who confirmed what I suspected. As the holder of the water rights, I had significant leverage. The HOA's contract with Westlake Water Company technically required my approval that had never been sought from previous owners, who likely didn't understand what they possessed. Armed with this knowledge, I waited for Kathleen's next move. I didn't have to wait long. When I returned home, a work crew was packing up equipment in my front yard. My garden beds had been dismantled, the soil dumped unceremoniously on my lawn, and my carefully nurtured seedlings lay wilting in the sun. "What happened here?" I demanded, approaching the workers. "HOA enforcement," said one of the men, looking uncomfortable. "We were told you'd been properly notified and the removal deadline had passed." I checked my security cameras that evening. The footage showed Kathleen personally directing the crew, pointing out which beds to remove first. The next day, a certified letter arrived with a bill for $1,200 for landscape remediation services. My 7-day compliance period hadn't even ended. That night I couldn't sleep. The garden destruction had triggered memories I'd been working hard to manage. In Afghanistan, I'd helped local farmers rebuild irrigation systems destroyed by conflict. Seeing my own garden demolished brought back the image of an old farmer weeping over his ruined crops after a firefight. By morning, I'd made my decision. This wasn't just about a garden anymore. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a building that always reminded me of an oversized dollhouse with its gingerbread trim and lavender shutters. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and documents at a side table. Kathleen noticed me immediately when she entered with her entourage, HOA Vice President Thomas Barrett and Secretary Diane Perkins. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Mr. Evans, I didn't expect to see you here." She straightened her silk scarf. "We haven't received payment for your violations or the remediation services." "That's one of the topics I'd like to discuss tonight," I replied calmly. As other homeowners filtered in, I greeted each one. Many seemed surprised that I knew their names. I'd done my homework on the community I'd joined. When the meeting began, Kathleen ran through the agenda with military precision. When she reached new business, I raised my hand. "The chair recognizes Jake Evans," she said with obvious reluctance. I stood up. "Thank you. I'd like to discuss 2 issues tonight. First, the destruction of my garden without due process according to the HOA's own bylaws, which require a 7-day notice period and a hearing before any action can be taken." Murmurs spread through the room. Kathleen's face remained impassive. "And second," I continued, connecting my laptop to the projector, "I'd like to discuss the community's water rights and the current contract with Westlake Water Company." The room went silent. On the screen, I displayed the deed showing my ownership of the water rights to the aquifer beneath Pinewood Estates. As many of you may not know, the water rights for this entire subdivision are attached to my property. This means that legally, I control access to the aquifer that supplies our community. Kathleen's face drained of color. Thomas Barrett began whispering urgently in her ear. I've reviewed the contract between the HOA and Westlake Water, I continued. For the past 15 years, Westlake has been paying a fee for access to this water, a fee that should have been passed on to the rights holder. Instead, according to HOA financial records, which are public, those funds have been diverted to an administrative account. The room erupted. Homeowners began shouting questions at Kathleen, who looked like she might faint. "Order!" she shouted, banging her gavel. "This is completely inappropriate. Mr. Evans is new here and clearly doesn't understand our community arrangements." "What I understand," I said calmly, "is that approximately $15,000 per year has been collected by the HOA for water rights access. Over 15 years, that's $225,000 that should have been paid to the rights holder." An older gentleman in the back stood up. "Is that why our water fees keep increasing? We're paying double what the next subdivision overpays." Kathleen tried to regain control. "We have administrative costs, like your new Mercedes?" someone shouted. I held up my hand. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm proposing a solution." That got everyone's attention. "I've spoken with Westlake Water. They're willing to negotiate a new contract directly with me as the rights holder, which would lower costs for everyone. Additionally, I'm requesting that the HOA board provide a full accounting of the water access fees collected over the past 15 years. Thomas Barrett pulled Kathleen aside, their heated whispers carrying across the suddenly quiet room. I caught fragments. "Audit would reveal," and "could go to jail." When Kathleen returned to the podium, her composure had cracked. "This meeting is adjourned. We'll investigate these allegations and respond appropriately." As people began filing out, many stopped to speak with me. Some shared their own stories of Kathleen's rule by intimidation. Others offered to help with my garden. By the time I left, I had a dozen neighbors volunteering to help replant what had been destroyed. But the war was far from over. The next few days brought an escalation. First came the letters from the HOA's attorney threatening legal action for defamation and community disruption. Then anonymous complaints to various county departments, code enforcement, health department, even animal control, despite my not owning any pets. The pressure might have worked if I hadn't spent 20 years handling explosive situations. Instead, I methodically documented each incident and filed counter-complaints when appropriate. My new ally Gina proved invaluable. Her knowledge of local history and connections at the county offices helped navigate the bureaucratic maze. She also organized a neighborhood potluck in my backyard, technically against HOA rules, but no one seemed concerned anymore. "You've started a revolution," she said as we watched neighbors mingling, many meeting for the first time despite living doors away from each other for years. "Kathleen has ruled through isolation. When people don't talk to each other, they can't compare notes." The potluck revealed more than just community spirit. Martin Chin, who worked at the county assessor's office, mentioned that Pinewood Estate's water bills didn't match typical usage patterns. "The volume they're paying for exceeds what this subdivision could possibly use," he explained. "Unless everyone's running fountains in their basements." This new information led me to request water usage records from the county. What I found was disturbing. For years, the water pumped from our aquifer had been nearly double what our community consumed. Where was the rest going? The answer came unexpectedly. While replanting my garden with neighbors' help, we hit something metallic about 2 feet down. Further careful digging revealed an unauthorized pipe, one that wasn't on any official plans. I hired a private utility locator who traced the pipe. It ran from our community's main water line directly to Sunset Hills, the luxury development where Kathleen owned several rental properties. The pieces were falling into place. Kathleen wasn't just pocketing water rights fees, she was stealing the water itself, redirecting it to her properties while charging both communities for the same resource. Before confronting her, I needed irrefutable proof. With Gina's help, I obtained historical satellite imagery showing the unauthorized construction 5 years earlier. County permits confirmed no approval had been granted for the connection. Armed with this evidence, I bypassed Kathleen entirely and went straight to the HOA's attorney with Gina as my witness. The lawyer, previously antagonistic, turned ashen as he reviewed the documentation. "This is extremely serious," he said, removing his glasses. "Criminal charges could apply." "I'm aware," I replied. "I'm giving the board 48 hours to call an emergency meeting before I take this to the authorities." That night, as I was finishing dinner, someone threw a brick through my front window with a note attached. "Back OFF or else." My security camera caught a glimpse of a silver Mercedes speeding away. The intimidation tactic might have worked on someone else. Instead, I called the sheriff. The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. Rumors had spread like wildfire, and homeowners demanded answers. Thomas Barrett conducted the meeting. Kathleen was conspicuously absent. "Due to personal matters, Mrs. Walsh is temporarily stepping back from her duties," Barrett announced, looking uncomfortable. I raised my hand. "I think the community deserves to know that Mrs. Walsh is currently being questioned by the Sheriff's Department regarding water theft, financial fraud, and criminal threats." Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Barrett tried to maintain order, but the dam had broken. Homeowners demanded answers about their water bills, the unauthorized pipe, the missing funds. "The board has initiated a full forensic audit," Barrett finally admitted. "Preliminary findings suggest significant financial irregularities. We've frozen all HOA accounts pending investigation." By meeting's end, an interim board had been elected, with Gina Ellis as acting president. The new board's first action was to approve a resolution supporting my garden and establishing a community garden space in the previously underused park area. As we were leaving, Barrett pulled me aside. "You don't know what you've done," he whispered, his face drawn. "Kathleen has powerful friends." "So do I," I replied. "They're called neighbors." 2 days later, the county sheriff arrested Kathleen Walsh on multiple charges: grand theft, fraud, falsifying business records, and criminal threats. The investigation revealed she'd been siphoning off not just water rights fees but also building up massive reserves in HOA accounts, then using those funds for personal investments while deferring needed community maintenance. The unauthorized water line to Sunset Hills had saved her rental properties over $100,000 in water bills over 5 years, while Pinewood residents paid inflated rates to cover the usage. Most damning was the evidence found in her home office: detailed records of how she manipulated HOA rules to target homeowners who questioned her authority, including plans to force several elderly residents on fixed incomes to sell their homes through escalating fines and harassment. 1 year later, my garden was flourishing. The raised beds now extended across my front yard in a carefully planned design that had become something of a neighborhood attraction. Children from the community often stopped by after school to help water and harvest, learning about growing food from seed. The new HOA board, with Gina still serving as president, had rewritten the covenants with community input, focusing on real issues like safety and maintenance while eliminating the micromanagement that had characterized Kathleen's reign. As for the water rights, I'd worked with an attorney to establish a community trust. The aquifer now officially belonged to all Pinewood residents, with transparent pricing and professional management. Kathleen Walsh was serving 3 years for her crimes, her empire of rental property sold off to pay restitution to the homeowners she'd defrauded. Thomas Barrett and Diane Perkins had avoided jail time by cooperating with investigators, though both had moved away, unable to face their former neighbors. That evening, as I harvested tomatoes in the golden late summer light, a family stopped to admire the garden. "We're considering buying the Henderson place," the father said, gesturing down the street. "But we heard this neighborhood had HOA issues." I smiled, offering his children cherry tomatoes from my harvest basket. "We did have issues, but we fixed them." The man nodded appreciatively. "I like a community that solves its own problems." As they continued their walk, I looked around at the neighborhood that had become my home. Houses that had once appeared identical now showed signs of individuality: colorful front doors, unique landscaping, personal touches that reflected the people who lived inside. That night, neighbors gathered in my backyard for our weekly community dinner, a tradition that had started with that first rebellious potluck. We ate at tables set up on the lawn, sharing dishes made with vegetables from my garden and others that had sprung up throughout the neighborhood. Gina raised her glass in a toast. To Jake, who taught us that sometimes you have to fight for your right to grow tomatoes. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. I felt a peace I hadn't known since before my deployment. My therapist had been right, gardening was healing. But so was finding your place in a community, putting down roots in more ways than one. As the sun set over Pinewood Estates, I knew I had found not just a house, but a home. And it had started with a garden and the courage to stand up to a bully with a pink folder. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when what you're defending is the right to heal, to grow, and to build something beautiful from the ground up.